In this video, I'm just going to give a introduction to Lab 3. So if you go to the Lab 3 page from the syllabus, you can see the logistics of the assignment just as we've seen before, and submission instructions. Make sure that you push your tag. You use get push dash dash tags to push it up. So in this lab, we're going to practice file redirection, and we're also going to practice using arrays. Your task is to write a program that's going to grade a multiple choice exam. So when you're using arrays and you see something like this, where you know that n is going to be between 1 and 10, so there are going to be no more than 10 questions on this exam, that should always jump out to you that you can set your array to have size 10, because you know maybe you're going to get fewer than 10, but you're never going to get more. And since arrays have fixed size, we can't make an array that's too small and then make it bigger later. So it's easiest if we just initialize our array to have that max size. So you're going to get the information about the exam from standard input, meaning you should use scanf, but you'll actually want to read that using redirection. So we can see that we have a example input file here. So the first thing that I would do if I was working on this is take a look at that sample input file. It's pasted here, but it's really small, so I figure we might as well go over there. So here I am in my CSCI 112 directory that's being tracked by Git. And so I would go into my lab 3 directory. You'll probably need to create this. And in order to copy that file over, I can do CP. And we can see here I could actually just copy this if I wanted to. But it's in public lab 3. And it's called testdata.txt, and if I just want to keep that same name, I can just use a dot. And now I see I do have testdata.txt, and let's take a look. So it says that the first line contains the number of questions followed by the correct answer for each question. So here this is saying there are 8 questions. So we knew it could be up to 10 questions, but in this example file it happens to be exactly 8. And these are the correct answers. So C, C, D, D, A, B, C, E. Those are the correct answers. Now, all of the following lines contain a student ID number, followed by that student's answers to each question. So here we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students. The first one had student ID number 100, and that person answered B to the first one, C to the first one, etc. So they got the first one wrong, they got the second one right. So what you're going to do with this information is print out a report about the exam showing these things here. So I'll just run it. So I don't think I have a compiled version of mine, so I'll just do that. So here's a already completed lab 3, and so if I do lab 3 and then I use my file redirection, so this is saying use as standard input this file, testdata.txt. And so here we see first we get a report, we see what the correct answers were in this nicely formatted thing. So this is using tabs to format this, and when we get to the grading, you'll see that that's actually required for this assignment. But so I have this nice format here. Next, I print out each student and their grade. So how are you going to figure out that grade? Well, let's look back at the test data. So our first student, let's see, they got the first question wrong because B is not equal to C. Second question was right because C does equal C. D here, oops, does equal D there. And so that's how you're going to compute their grade. So print out the grade here. Again, these are using tabs to have this nice spacing. You're going to need to match this formatting exactly. And then finally, we get a little report of how many people missed each question. So you're also going to keep track of, need to compute that inside your program. So if I'm just getting started on this, I would make my source code. So I'm just going to call mine new lab 3, but you would call yours lab 3. And I know I'm probably going to use standard IO. And I actually might start off defining, so I know that the max size of my array is 10, right? Because I know I'm not going to have any more than 10 questions. So maybe I might call that something like max size, and that's just 10. And then I might give myself a nice comment here, program to read information about a multiple choice exam and print out results. And I've got my main that returns int. So I always like to just start off with the program that runs. So I could, at this point, I could just compile and run, make sure that I haven't introduced any errors yet. But let's just assume that I haven't, and I'll just continue on. So I think a good practice, especially when my output is so nicely kind of sequential, like I need to print out the answer key, print out the grades per student, and then print out this information about my missed, what questions were missed. I always like to just start off by giving myself some comments about what I need to do in this program. So my main's kind of just like my control program. I just have a list of steps. So I need to read in the exam, let's see, read in the correct answers. I need to, and sometimes I write this sort of plan for myself, and I realize later as I'm working on it that that plan actually isn't going to work, and I need to rewrite my plan. But I always like to start off with a big plan of how I'm going to accomplish, how I'm going to write my program. So I'm going to read in those correct answers. I need to print the correct answers. Then I need to print the grade. I guess I maybe need to compute grades and find number missed per question. Maybe that's multiple functions, maybe that's one function. Then I need to print the grades, and then I need to print the number missed per question. Again, maybe your program isn't structured this way, or maybe I even change this later, but that's okay. So let's move on to the grading, just because we want to make sure that we get all the points. So just like in previous labs, we need comments, we need indentation, we want to make sure that our program compiles without any warnings. And on this one, we're actually required to use tabs for the spacing. So if you, in order to match that, so in order to, You could maybe in previous labs, you could have just put a bunch of spaces here, right? And maybe you could have made it look the same. In this one, you're actually required to use tabs. So definitely come to class or ask if you are having any trouble with that. So maybe I would just write this note to myself. And okay, so we have to use the tabs. Like I said, we have to match that output formatting exactly. If you have trailing spaces or anything like that, that's okay, but I am going to put your output into DivChecker with my test data. And so I do want you to match the output format exactly. Let's see here. Let's get out of here again. Like for example, you shouldn't have a space between grade and percent. And these should be printed with exactly 2 decimal points. So all of those things matter. Then we get points for correctly actually making the computation, so the grades, the number of students who missed each question. And then here, this is telling us we need to use 2 arrays, one to store the right answers and one to store the missed number of answers. So I might start off just putting those in, right? So it says array for right answers. And so maybe that looks something like, well, those answers are things like A, B, C, right? Those are all chars. So I'm going to have a char array. And maybe I'll call it right answers. And I know that it should be max size. So I would just put that in here. And now that's initialized. And then I also need an array for missed answers, right? That's going to count up how many are missed so that I can print it in the end. And so those are going to be counts, right? So counts are going to be integers. And then maybe I'll call this missed answers. And again, I could just use max size here. And so now I know that I'm on my way to getting those 10 points that I'm actually using arrays. And then finally, you need to use at least 2 functions in addition to main. My guess is you'll probably use more than 2 functions, but at the very least, you're going to need 2 functions. And that is the intro to, oh, actually, not quite yet. Let's see just one more thing. I just wanted to show how you can use DivChecker to check that your answer is correct. So if I get out of here and I take a look at the output, so this is my output right here, right? And there's provided output on the Lab 3 page. So for example, your program should output the following given the provided testdata.txt file. So what I can do is I copy this, I just go to DivChecker, and so that's I could think of this as the original. This is what I'm trying to match. And my output is just this stuff right here, so I can copy it directly from the terminal into here. I could also, if I wanted to, I could use file redirection, right? So we have, instead of my output going to the terminal, I could have it go to something like out.txt. And now I could look at out.txt, and this is what I'd need to paste in there. I guess I'd need to get rid of the numbers by doing set no number or set no new, and then I could get rid of those. But I can also just paste it from the console. So this was mine, and I want to check that it matches. So I can click find differences, and mine, I have succeeded. That's great. One thing you might notice, if you use spaces here instead of tabs, you're going to have differences. And so you're going to need to get rid of those differences. So maybe you have, the one thing that's okay here is if you don't have spaces at the end. So the way that I print these out is a for loop, and every iteration of the for loop, I'm printing one element of my array, and I'm adding a space after it. So that's why in the original, what's posted, I'll just grab it again. So what's posted on here is the output from my program, and so you can see that there are these trailing spaces at the end. So maybe somehow you did it differently, and maybe yours doesn't have those spaces. That would be okay. So you don't have to match trailing spaces, but you do have to match those tabs, etc. So if you didn't have those trailing spaces, you don't need to go add spaces to your program or anything. That's fine. Yours would look like this, but my guess is you'll probably just be identical because you probably will just use your for loop and print out your int or your char and then a space, and then you get those trailing spaces. So that is lab 3. Good luck.